Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Stephanie.
I'm Tom.
Hey, it's our feature unit, but this is a 2-day unit, guys. We're going to be talking about geopolitical issues.
Exactly.
Yeah, something that's going on in other parts of the world, but it is going to affect us eventually.
Sure, and you probably have heard the news about Russia invading Ukraine. That began several months ago.
February.
But yeah, that's in a couple of countries that are really, really far away. So what does that have to do with us? Well, we're going to tell you that this invasion of Ukraine is a global disaster. It affects everybody in the world. I think mainly because it involves food shipping and things like that.
It involves fuel.
And fuel and gasoline and I guess natural gas for Europe. Yeah. And so it's quite complicated and it does affect all of us. So the more we know about it, the better our lives should be in the future. So let's find out more about this global disaster, why Russia's invasion is such a big disaster. Let's read through the entire contents of our lesson now one time. Russia shocked the world by invading Ukraine in a major escalation of the Russo Ukrainian War in February. At the time of the outbreak, few people realized how long the conflict would last or the adverse consequences it might trigger. However, as the months go by, the true cost of the war for the global economy is starting to become apparent. Oil prices have skyrocketed and food costs have surged. Take fuel prices, for example. All around the world, prices at the pump have risen to all-time highs, so driving has become a much more expensive mode of transport for many people. It's hard to see how best to implement solutions, too, as there are multiple causes of the commodity crisis. Ukraine is a major supplier of many kinds of produce, including various grains, iron ore, and over 50% of the world's sunflower oil. Russia's invasion has resulted in a severe reduction of exports. With the Black Sea ports of Mariupol and Odessa closed off, trade routes must now follow treacherous land passages. Reports also claim that Russia has targeted warehouses containing Ukrainian produce in an attempt to further disrupt trade and cut off income. In addition, many countries, companies, and organizations have imposed trade bans on Russia. This has provoked Russia into retaliation, which has seen it reduce or even stop exports to a number of countries. This is hitting places that rely on Russian oil, such as Germany, Finland, and Norway, particularly hard. Travel to Russia is now also off limits to citizens of many countries, which is taking its toll on tourism and the money it brings in.
Okay, guys, let's get started. We're talking about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, or Ukraine. You can pronounce that country either way. When you invade a country, you go in usually with military forces. So you have your military that goes in and they enter a country or a region and they want to take control of that area. They want to occupy it. America has invaded countries in the past, like when we went into Iraq. So we are familiar with this. But this is Russia invading a country called Ukraine. And a lot of the people in Ukraine have Russian ancestry, or they speak Russian. So they have a close relationship. We won't talk about why they went in, but they did go in. And now there's an escalation. If there's an escalation of something, it just means something continues to get higher or worse. Whatever you're talking about, the degree becomes more severe. When there's an escalation, that's a noun, but escalate is the verb.
Again, the word invade is the verb, and invading is based on the verb. And, of course, the noun form is invasion. So there has been an invasion of Ukraine by Russia. And I guess they were at war before because of the Crimean Peninsula there. So this is an escalation of an already going on war. We're calling it the Russo Ukrainian War, and it began in February, or at least the particular phase that we're talking about began in February. At the time of the outbreak, few people realized how long the conflict would last or the adverse consequences it might trigger. So when this started, when there was this outbreak of war, people didn't really know how long it was going to go on or how it would affect everybody in the world. Now we have the word outbreak here. That's based on the verb phrase to break out. You could say war broke out in, 1939 in Europe when Germany invaded Poland. It broke out then. And then you have to switch these words around to make the noun form here. Outbreak. The outbreak of the pandemic began, in 2019 or so? And now we've got the outbreak of this war, which occurred last February.
You can also use outbreak to talk about a fight. A fight broke out. And you could also say a fire broke out, but it's when something that's bad starts very suddenly and it's not very welcome. It could be a war, a disease, as Tom just mentioned. COVID broke out. We had an outbreak of COVID. I think you're right. It was the end of 2019 for us. So yeah, at the time of the outbreak, and we have a lot of these types of nouns where we take a verb phrase and we put it together, like check out at the grocery store. But the checkout counter, you would use it as one word, right? So checkout counter. So at the time that the outbreak happened, few people realized how long the conflict would last or the adverse consequences it might trigger. Adverse just means bad. Something that's harmful, you don't want it to be there. It can prevent somebody having success or something from developing. I know with some medicines, sometimes there are adverse reactions. You take some medicine that's supposed to help one thing, but it hurts something else in your body. That happens sometimes too. So adverse just means bad, harmful, unfavorable, something that people aren't very happy to see.
I suppose a lot of people thought, well, Russia's a big, huge country. Ukraine's kind of small, so this war should be over in about a week or two. But it has dragged on for several months.
That's because NATO got involved. We've got all of these countries from the West who are just sending money and weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine's not doing very well, though. They kind of need to wrap this up. The Russians have won, and it's just killing more people for nothing.
Indeed. So, yes, indeed, at the time when it started, people did not know how long it would last or what the adverse consequences would be. And here it goes on to say, however, as the months go by, the true cost of the war for the global economy is starting to become apparent. So now we can sort of feel exactly the consequences of this war that is going on. The true cost of the war is becoming apparent. It is now clear. People kind of know what's going on. We can talk about oil prices, of course. That's pretty important if you need to fill up your car with gasoline and go to and from work or, take your mom to the hospital for her regular checkups or whatever. So oil prices are very necessary to keep under control. And, of course, they've skyrocketed, which means they've gone up a lot. So, of course, we're paying more for gasoline nowadays. And food costs have surged. So the money you pay for food, that has also gone up. It has surged. To surge just means to move rather quickly, usually in an upward direction, although not necessarily. You could have a surge of electricity in your house current, and that might destroy some electric appliances. So you need to have those strips, in case there's an electric surge.
Surge protectors, we sometimes call them. Or maybe you're by the ocean and there could be a tidal surge where a lot of water just suddenly rushes up. You could have a surge of emotion. As you are experiencing something very emotional. So we use that quite often, actually. So it's just a sudden, powerful movement. Could be a surge in the crowd. The crowd surges forward. You'll hear that a lot, too. So, yeah, these food costs have started surging. We don't see it too much yet in Taiwan, but boy, do they see it in America already. So all around the world, prices at the pump. When you see that word pump, it just means at the gas station or the petrol station where you go and fill your car up or your scooter up with gas. Yeah, prices at the pump have risen to all-time highs. So driving has become a much more expensive mode of transport for many people. I noticed it because I was trying to buy a ticket to go home for the holidays, and yeah, it's a lot more expensive.
Indeed, and of course, gasoline for your car is more expensive. Although, if you ride a scooter, it probably isn't going to make a big difference because scooters have such great gas mileage.
Well, that's nice.
But if you're like me and you ride your bicycle, you're not affected by fuel prices. So what are you waiting for? Get on your bicycle. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our explanation for today. Let's take a time out and listen now to our Chinese teacher.
Hello everyone, 我是派老师。今天讲解的是11月9号 Unit6 Why Russia's invasion of Ukraine is a global disaster 第一天的课程。这个单元触及乌俄战争。大家知道俄罗斯在2022年年初入侵乌克兰，战争持续了半年以上。我们在做这个课程录音的时候还看不到战争的尽头呢。好，我们现在一起来看看这篇文章的学习重点。请同学先看第一个句子，从 Russia shocked 这里开始，一直到 February。好，请同学特别注意画底线的 escalation 这个单字。请同学先注意动词形态是 escalate，E-S-C-A-L-A-T-E。那它有呢升高的意思。同学会觉得这个字不好记吗？我想很多人应该都知道电扶梯叫 escalator。好，那我们知道电扶梯会带着我们越走越高，所以这样就记起来 escalate。那在这边也要提醒同学 escalate 还有一个类似的同义词叫 intensify， intensify， 那也可以用来指升高。好，再来，请同学看到第二个句子。老师要请同学特别注意的是 realize 后面有没有看到 realize 是及物动词，后面要加名词当受词。不过这里比较特殊的是 realize 后面先加了一个名词子句，后面用对了连接词 or 连接，再加了一个名词 adverse consequences。那要请同学特别注意的，这个当然指的就是负面的结果。好，那另外要请同学特别注意的是词语搭配，就是我们知道说什么后果，它前面用的动词引发所用的就是 trigger。再来，请同学看到第三个句子。第三个句子呢，就是指说我们因为这场战争，结果全球经济付出代价。再来，请同学看到的是第四个句子，这里讲到说油价飙升，怎么表示飙升呢？就是 skyrocketed 是原形。那除此之外，我们说食物的价格上升，也可以用 surge， 这两个动词都请同学画起来哦。好，那我们来看一下第六个句子，让我们进一步的看到说，原来啊，石油价格上升导致呢汽油每公升的汽油价格也增加了。Prices at the pump 当然指的呢就是在加油站这些汽油也都变贵了。Prices at the pump have risen to all-time highs， 从来没有这么高的油价过。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back, guys. This is our feature unit, and we're talking about a geopolitical issue right now. It's something that's happening in the world. It's not that close to us, but it is affecting us. So we could say we're feeling the consequences of this particular conflict between Russia and Ukraine, although it's not just Ukraine, it's all of the Western countries that are trying to send tons and tons of money over to the Ukrainians, but they don't know how to use some of the weapons, and we're finding out all of those weapons we're sending are ending up on the black market.
Oh, no.
So it's not a good thing. Yeah. We hope that this it gets wrapped up, or by the time you listen to this program, they might have wrapped it up, hopefully. So we talked about things like invading a country. What is that? It's when an army goes into a country. They're not invited. They want to occupy that country or take control. Of course, if you live in that country that's being invaded, you probably want your soldiers to protect you and to protect your country. So we talked about what an outbreak is. It's when suddenly something happens, and it's usually a bad thing, an outbreak of fire. The fire broke out. COVID broke out. We had a COVID outbreak. Adverse means harmful. If you see that word, it's not something that you're welcoming. You don't want to see adverse consequences. Consequences, of course, are the result of somebody's action. Could be your own actions, right? It could be actions that come because somebody wants something from you, and then it just makes life more difficult for you. Well, some of the difficulties that have arisen is that it's affecting oil prices around the world. Russia has a lot of natural gas. So the way that the European Union got their gas earlier, they either had nuclear power plants, like France, and Germany had some, or they imported their oil or gas. They don't have any. So when the war broke out, the EU leaders said, you cannot buy fuel from Russia. So now they're really struggling, and people are struggling just to pay the bill, or they're worried about the winter time because it gets quite cold.
Indeed. So, of course, oil prices have gone up. They've skyrocketed. They've surged. And, of course, driving is more expensive nowadays. And maybe you feel this at the pump here in Taiwan. So, of course, we've got problems with food distribution and with fuel. So it's hard to see how best to implement solutions too, as there are multiple causes of the commodity crisis. So the commodities, of course, refer to food and fuel. And yeah, how can we implement solutions? What can we do about it? Well, Ukraine is a major supplier of many kinds of produce, including various grains, iron ore, and over 50% of the world's sunflower oil. Now, in my home, we use grapeseed oil to fry our food, but some of you may choose to use sunflower oil to cook with or to create your dishes or whatever. So you may have noticed that sunflower oil prices have gone up in the supermarket. And these are things that come from Ukraine because it's a major supplier of these commodities. Like various grains, I think wheat is a big grain that comes from Ukraine. Also iron ore, which is the raw material where iron comes from. You need it to make steel. And as I said, sunflower oil also comes from Ukraine.
One of the worst results of this, though, hasn't just been these things that are mentioned here. It's that the fact that Ukraine actually is either the number 1 or number 2 producer of fertilizer, which farms need everywhere around the world. And of course, the EU banned that. So did the US. They said you can't buy Russia's fertilizer. They had to change that ban after they saw how it was destroying people's farms. So we'll see what happens here. It's kind of an interesting time in our world. Russia's invasion has resulted in a severe reduction of exports. So if something is very severe, maybe you got injured, maybe you had a bike accident or a scooter accident, and your injuries were severe. It means they were very serious. So you don't want anything to be very severe. Mild is probably the opposite there. So they had a severe reduction or a decrease of exports, things going out of Russia or Ukraine into other countries. Now, the Black Sea is right there off Ukraine itself, and it's by the cities of Mariupol and Odessa, and those are closed off right now. They're mines, which means small bombs that have been planted in the Black Sea by the Ukrainians so that if any ships come in, they'll be blown up. So it's just kind of a dangerous time. These trade routes must now follow treacherous, that's a word that means dangerous.
Right.
Treacherous land passages. Reports also claim that Russia has targeted warehouses containing Ukrainian produce. Produce is just vegetables and fruit that you farm. They're kinds of crops that farmers make, crops that are grown. They've done this in an attempt to disrupt trade, exchanging goods and services with other countries and cut off income. What does it mean to cut off something, Tom?
To stop something, basically. So, of course, they want income. They want money coming in. So they want to cut it off. They want to stop it. They want to block it. And that's happening because Russia is firing missiles into warehouses which contain Ukrainian produce, which would be food they're producing. They're stored in these warehouses. And Russia is firing missiles at those warehouses. Now let's move on now to the next paragraph here. It says, in addition, many countries, companies, and organizations have imposed trade bans on Russia. A ban, of course, is when you forbid someone to do something. Of course, this happens all the time between different countries in the world. Or if a certain government doesn't like certain information, they will ban that information. They'll ban books, for example. You hear about this all the time. There was some effort earlier in the year in the U.S. to ban a certain graphic novel. I'm not going to get into the details there, but it was kind of silly.
Yeah, it can be silly. But it can also be bad if your country's based on free speech, right? So got to watch out for that. Depends on who's in control and who's banning what. We forbid it. So they imposed trade bans on Russia. This has provoked Russia into retaliation. To retaliate is the verb. If someone hits you, you can retaliate by hitting them back. That's retaliation. So someone attacks you or assaults you, and so you return that attack or assault to get even. That doesn't usually work, guys. It just makes things worse. So it's seen Russia reduce or even stop exports to a number of countries. They're willing to export a lot of things, but they say now, you must pay in rubles, which is the money that Russia has. Usually we've had international trade done in dollars. But that's changing, I think, very quickly. So don't provoke people. You might have a classmate that you don't really get along with. And maybe sometimes that classmate kind of, says little comments that make you mad. That person's trying to provoke you. So they're doing something that gets you to feel emotional or angry so that you'll fight back. So be careful. Don't let people provoke you into anger or losing your temper.
Yeah, retaliation is most often used when we talk about actions between nations, like the U.S. may put tariffs on Chinese products, so China retaliates by putting tariffs on American products. It goes back and forth all the time. And so this forced Russia into retaliation, or they were provoked into retaliation. And, of course, that has had also other consequences as well. They have reduced or even stopped exports to a number of countries, and everybody probably feels that in some way. Now, this is hitting places that rely on Russian oil, such as Germany, Finland, and Norway particularly hard. So if Russia does not send oil to Germany or Finland or Norway, hey, those people are going to suffer because of that, and they're going to need oil to run their factories and produce their fancy cars that people like to buy. Imagine that affecting the price of your Audi or your Benz or your BMW because Germany doesn't have enough fuel to run their factories. So, of course, those cars are going to be more expensive, which might be a good thing because then you can brag to your friends how much you paid for your new car.
I worry about the elderly in homes and they can't heat their home enough during the winter. That's who I worry about. So travel to Russia, off limits, or it was when we recorded this. That means you can't go. It's very hard to find an airline that will fly directly there. They've kind of all banned those flights. So it's taking its toll on tourism. If something takes its toll on something, it just says it means after a while, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And it just deteriorates as time goes on. Maybe you have a cold and you're not taking care of yourself, and that cold starts taking its toll on you. You can't work. You don't feel like going out of the house. Be careful. Don't let something just keep getting worse and worse. Put a stop to it and try to get back to an even keel. K-E-E-L, an even keel, which means you're kind of balanced.
So it's a big mess in that part of the world, and hopefully they'll sort it out. And of course, if there are some things you didn't quite understand in an explanation, well, hopefully our Chinese teacher will be able to sort things out for you now.
好，请同学看到第二段第一个句子，这边告诉我们说，构成商品危机的原因错综复杂，所以我们也很难去判断出到底要怎么样最有效的实施解决方案。好，要请同学看到第二个句子，在逗点之前是不是看到了有个字？请不要念错重音这叫做 produce。produce 指的就是农产品。那乌克兰盛产农产，包括各式各样的谷类。好啦，请同学要特别注意到这里就结束了，后面就不属于农产品了。像 iron ore 指的是铁矿砂、铁矿石。好，再来呢，请同学看到第四个句子，要特别注意这个句子的文法。with 在这里呢，并不是表示工具，而是对于主要子句的附加说明、附带说明，让我们知道说主要子句是在什么样子的状况之下发生的。好，所以我们知道说贸易路线因为战争的关系必须要改道了。那在什么样的情况之下呢？ With the Black Sea ports of Mariupol and Odessa closed off。 请同学特别注意的是 with 是介系词，所以它后面的动词一定要经过变化的。所以这边这两个海港是被关闭的，which were closed off。 那如果你要省略了这些关带的话，要表示这些港口在什么样子的状态之下，那我们就是保留这个过去分词。好，再来请同学看到第三段的第一个句子。In addition, many countries, companies, and organizations have imposed trade bans on Russia. 那为了要表达大家对俄罗斯侵略乌克兰这样子的不认同，所以很多国家其实呢都对俄罗斯怎么样呢？没有错，就是实施贸易禁令。好 ，impose trade bans on， 请特别注意动词是 impose。impose a ban 实施什么样子的限制，动词用 impose。 再来请同学看到第二个句子， This has provoked Russia into retaliation， 这也造成了俄罗斯呢采取报复。好，所以这个 provoke 其实呢就是有引发俄罗斯做什么样子的动作， retaliation 报复。再来请同学最后看到第四个句子Off limits 所指的就是禁区，还有最后面的这个片语要记起来 taking its toll on tourism。 那也就是呢，这件事情也对于观光造成了负面的冲击 taking its toll on tourism。 以上就是我们针对这篇文章所做的中文讲解，谢谢大家。
That's it for today, everybody. But this is a big, messy situation, so of course there are a lot more things to say about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So please join us next time when our discussion continues. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.